So I have a question that I don't feel like is broached very often, which is the effect of transgender people on the mental health of the unattractive. So like really weak femmy dudes or really butch ugly chicks, they've got people like assuming that they're trans at a bar or something. Like the ugly
Oh,
women already had it hard enough,
Yeah.
and now
yeah.
they've got people assuming they're dudes at a bar.
Well, I think that happens. I would assume that happens a lot to lesbians, which would suck. Like if you're a butch lesbian and now everybody's assuming that you're a dude.
Yeah.
It happens a lot more now than it did 10 years ago.
I'm sure. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
That's
I
good.
would
That's
find
kind
that
of a
extremely
good
annoying if I was a lesbian.
yeah, that's kind of a good point. I guess yeah, because some lesbians like they maybe want to look like a guy, but they're like, I don't want to be a guy. They're just like, I'm just a
Well, it
butch.
seems like the younger ones do, but in the olden days, like all of the lesbians that I've known in my time through, radical feminism and women who came out of the second wave, there's a lot of butch lesbians and certainly a lot of lesbians who are like rejecting femininity. And they were totally appalled when this trans trend started coming along because all these young lesbians, 20 something or whatever, were starting to identify as trans men and then getting mastectomies and maybe taking hormones. And they were like, we're losing all our lesbians to the trans trend. And it used to just be okay to just be a lesbian, to kind of look like a boy. Like that's kind of like a hot thing for a lesbian, or to be butch or whatever. And I think that in the younger generations, that's it's much more rare, and it's more common for these girls to transition.
Yeah, I personally know, and because obviously people say there's a lot of like contagion, social contagion element. I personally know three female comedians who, when I met them, were lesbians, and then have all had mastectomies. Like,
Oh
what?
geez, that's
What are
sad.
the odds of that?
How old are they?
Uh all in their 30s.
I just find that sad.
But it's just like, what are the odds of that? Like, you know how many female comedians, period, there are in like Canada?
Right, not very many.
Like,
I
it's not
don't
like
think I know one.
well, yeah, you know what I mean? But it's not like
Name
it's
one.
even if it was 1,000, which it's not. 3 out of 1,000 would be a lot. If you go 3 out of 1,000 female comedians have had voluntary mastectomies, you go, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not even that. But you're like, how does
It's
something like that become a social contagion of like having like such a crazy surgery that like cannot be undone?
I mean, it's so funny because
What's
back
cool about
in
that?
the olden days, in the 70s, in the 80s, when I was a kid, the thing was, you can be whatever you want to be. Not you can be whatever you want to be, like you can be a boy if you're a girl, or you can be a giraffe or whatever. But if you're a girl, it's totally okay to be, a tomboy. That's sort of like how I thought of myself when I was a kid. I sort of like boy stuff better than girl stuff. It would have never occurred to me that I was actually a boy, nor would it have ever been suggested to me. But I think that genuine acceptance of pushing back against gender norms, gender stereotypes, gender roles, maybe the idea of gender fluidity, that actually was really accepted
Yeah.
in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I think a bit in the 90s too. And now it's the opposite. And now, so these women who are lesbians, so they're like, oh, well, I'm not this like feminine, hetero, girly girl. So I guess I must actually be male, rather than just being like, I'm just a woman who's not into femininity and I'm not heterosexual. I like girls and I like having short hair and wearing big flannels.
Yeah.
I feel particularly bad for the ugly straight girls. Like lesbians, they're not my issue, but the ugly straight girls who used to be the ones that you'd approach when you were like out of options, now you have that extra little thing in the back of your head, like, nah, I'd rather not. I'm drunk. I don't want to accidentally fuck a guy.
Oh, because you're worried that it's actually a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So they're
think
just
that
not even getting
paranoia
approached
would
by the
a whole
probably
can
be.
of worms getting opened up.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Well, he was saying both ways.
Well,
where I
and
guess
on dating
people,
apps too. Like imagine, like I'm imagining, I hate dating apps. I would never use them, but apparently lots of other people do. And I can just imagine swiping through and just being like, wait a minute, is that person really ugly, or is it
yeah,
actually a
there's a lot
man,
of them.
or vice versa? Probably. I mean, this happens to lesbians a lot too, I'm told, on like lesbian dating apps where they're swiping through and there's dudes who are trying to pass as women. And so probably maybe the same thing where you're like, is that like a really bad looking girl or is it actually a man? Like, I think this whole thing is making people more judgmental rather than less judgmental, because now they can't trust, now they can't believe, because these men are lying and saying that they're women.
Sure. And imagine if you're a biological woman and then some random person comes up to you and just like, you're so brave. Like, what are you talking about? You're
That would be
so
horrible.
brave.